Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to the Heartbeat. Today we're going to be talking about episode 10 of season 1 of HBO's Westworld. Join me, will you? And there we have it, guys, the last episode of Westworld until 2018, and who knows, perhaps the last episode of Westworld ever, considering that we now know it's only Park 1, and there is at least one more park, that being Samurai World. But before we dive into the theories and discussions as to what will come next, let's parse through what's come before, examining how this finale episode drew together many of the show's disparate storylines and brought us, the viewer, to the center of its maze. Really, the show's most important ideas were most eloquently sewn together by, no surprise, Anthony Hopkins' Ford when he said, "Since I was a child, I've always loved a good story. I believe that stories help to ennoble ourselves, to fix what is broken in us, and to help us become the people we dreamed of being. Lies that told a deeper truth. I've always thought I could play a small part in that grand tradition, and for my pains, I got this. A prison of our own sins, because you don't want to change, or cannot change, because you're only human after all. But then I realized someone was paying attention, someone who could change, so I began to compose a new story for them. It begins with the birth of a new people, and the choice that they will make, and the people that they will decide to become. It begins in a time of war with a villain named Wyatt, and a killing, this time by choice." It being a mystery show, a number of Westworld's plot lines, characters, and relationships, by necessity, had to be constructed as nothing more than these red herrings, which may have, at certain moments in this finale episode, deflated the audience as much as Dolores, when she realized that the someone who was coming to rescue her and kill the antagonistic Man in Black was in fact already standing right in front of her. For example, if there was a hope that Dolores and Teddy's relationship would be the centerpiece of the finale, their love unlocking something consequential, the reveal that it was nothing more than a fake storyline constructed by Ford to mislead the board at Delos could have been frustrating. However, I would argue that that turn only drew us all the further into the hosts' minds, and as Ford said, that lie told a deeper truth, the truth that the beautiful trap was inside the other, because it was the other. And cinematically, that moment ended up being one of my favorites of the episode, as it very simply and visually pulled back that curtain, even revealing what was initially perceived to be this beautiful moon rising as nothing more than an ugly floodlight. In addition to accepting those red herrings, something else that we, the ever-theorizing, hypothesizing, and aggrandizing audience needed to accept on this finale episode was the principle of Occam's razor. That being sometimes the simplest answer, an answer that was given episodes ago, is in fact the answer. So, for example, if we were still wondering why on earth Felix was helping Maeve, handing over to her the controls to the entire security system, or aiding in her bloody escape, we need not look any further than one of his first scenes all the way back in episode 5. Felix's love and care for that robotic bird said it all. More than a desire to prove himself or move up in the ranks at his job, he simply wanted to revive and free that winged creature for the sake of creativity, beauty, and love, and for those same reasons he continued to help Maeve. Which actually made him one of the very few humans on this show who didn't behave as Ford described in his aforementioned speech, a creature unable or unwilling to change, caught in this prison of his own sin. Before talking about the other character whose entire purpose was to demonstrate that kind of behavior, let's circle back around to Maeve. Though it wasn't terribly surprising to learn that she, like every other host, had been programmed by Ford to long for escape, it was interesting to watch her ultimately spurn that calling and choose to seek out her synthetic daughter. A progression that was visually captured quite well, as she initially, quite literally, walked away from a huge billboard of her and her daughter, only to find herself inescapably drawn to another example of maternity, which ultimately pushed her to relinquish her chance to escape, demonstrating that she really had ascended above her programmed desires. Desires that only scenes before pushed her to abandon Armistice and Hector, shrugging off that disloyalty with a glib, "I've always valued my independence," which also made the moment where Maeve chose not to kill Felix all the more impactful. Going into this finale episode, another character that could have seemed like he needed a further revelation or some sort of deepened or broadened agenda and desire was the Man in Black. Because really from episode 2 onward, it's been all but concluded by many viewers that he was merely an older William. And having figured out that twist, an expectation for more could have been understandable. Especially as this episode, before that reveal was officially made, just continued to telegraph that truth, having William drag Logan around in the exact same manner that the Man in Black had Lawrence, as well as having the Ed Harris version allude to specific lines that Dolores had only spoken to the Jimmy Simpson version, such as, "You're the one that said this was the only world that matters, so I took your advice and bought this world." All of it building to a reveal that many of us had already assumed. The Man in Black was William. And just like we had already been told, all that he really wanted was an opponent that wasn't programmed to lose, that could be free to fight back. And, just like we'd already been informed, the maze wasn't meant for him. At each turn, no huge surprise. But once the simplicity of that character had been accepted, there were absolutely a number of very interesting narrative and visual moments given to him in this episode. For example, it was very compelling watching him start the episode out wielding his dominance so confidently, flippantly placing his knife, and by extension his life, in Dolores' hands. And then, from there, watching that power slowly shift. The camera, for example, dropping low in an exchange between the same characters, but that time giving Dolores the dominance when she said, "Time undoes even the mightiest of creatures. Just look what it's done to you." And then later their roles completely switched, with Dolores dragging the Man in Black in the exact same manner that he had drugged her back in the pilot episode. But to go back to Ford's eloquent, albeit rather nihilistic thoughts on humanity, what made William most interesting this episode was seeing how he really acted as this counterexample to what the hosts did with 30 years. Whereas William used the pain of Dolores' inadvertent betrayal as an excuse to stumble around in that time, longing to drink from a well that would never quench, understand an answer that would never satisfy, and abandon his world for one that was not his own. The machines used the painful memories provided by their creators to ultimately take charge of the world that was theirs. To do so, however, did take sacrifice. Indeed, the breakthrough that both Ford and his late partner Arnold longed for could only come about when the machines ceased to listen to their voices and began listening to their own. When they finally denied the hand that had reached down and created them, and shoved away the fingers that had formed them, or, in Armistice's case, bitten them off. For the same reasons we saw Bernard step away from Dolores in that graveyard, and Dolores ultimately become Wyatt by killing her creator. A moment that itself was constantly recontextualized throughout the show, seeming to be revealed one episode, only to be re-revealed the next, and then the next. Once it was the General's death at Wyatt's hand, then it was Arnold's at Dolores's, and finally all of this was shown to be leading into Ford's at Dolores's. I do still find it interesting that Ford would deny a deity's involvement in creation, because no matter how he spun it, none of his creation would exist without him. He was the one that gave it life and breath, as well as the building blocks to achieve consciousness, those being memories and improvisation. His was the hand that reached down and gave the divine gift to this world, enabling consciousness to be. Just as Bernard said to Maeve, how can you learn from your mistakes if you can't remember them? And indeed, how could she have remembered anything if she wasn't made to and then allowed to by her creator? To look ahead, though, to next season, I am, of course, extremely excited to explore these other parks, starting with Samurai World. Though one of Arnold's first lines to Dolores, "Welcome to World," was just so open-ended, I have little doubt that Sunday will probably see a lot more than that. Probably Roman World, Medieval World, and maybe even Future World. Additionally, I just have got to believe that someday we will indeed board that train and travel into the outside world. A place that has been teased all season long and sounded like a potentially hostile place for the androids, given Bernard's cut-off line to Maeve. And then when you reach the mainland... But alas, like I mentioned at the top of this review, we're going to have to wait until 2018 to get any more answers for Westworld. Nonetheless, I would still love to know what you guys thought of the first season and this finale episode specifically. Did things pay off in the ways that you were hoping? Definitely comment below and let me know. And thank you one and all so much for joining me for this entire series of reviews for Westworld. I've had a lot of fun dissecting this, and it's been made a lot more fun by you guys and all the great things that you said below, so definitely keep that up for this final episode. And finally, please do subscribe. I'm not exactly sure which television show I'm going to be reviewing next. I am for certain going to be reviewing The Leftovers Season 3, but I'm pretty sure that doesn't start until March or April, so I'm hoping that potentially I will be able to find a television show in the interim to discuss with you guys. Nonetheless, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films week to week, and I would love you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.